That's sweet. Okay. Once, riding in old Baltimore, head filled, heart filled with glee, I saw a Baltimorean keep looking straight at me. Now, I was 8 and very small, and he was no whit bigger. And so I smiled. But he stuck out his tongue and called me nigger. I saw the whole of Baltimore from May until December. Of all the things that happened there, that's all that I remember. She does not know her beauty. She thinks her brown body has no glory. If she could dance naked under palm trees and see her image in the river, she would know. But there are no palm trees on the street, and dishwater gives back no images. Thank you. That's right. Aunt Whitney. Thank you. I am truly delighted to be here in this city of the University of Massachusetts at Amherst. It is a delight. The last time I was here, it was to help Mr. James Baldwin celebrate his birthday on this campus. I was pleased that the University of Massachusetts at Amherst honored Mr. Baldwin with that particular appointment which he has. And I was pleased for the University of Massachusetts at Amherst that Mr. Baldwin honored this campus, with his presence and his genius and his energy and his glory. I was pleased for both people involved, for both groups involved, because James Baldwin is certainly a group in himself. You, audience, you excite me so with your energy and your acceptance. I thank you too, especially since I know that Mr. Elie Wiesel is speaking tonight. I mean, if I wasn't here with you all, I would be there. So I really appreciate it very much that you have come to see me. I suppose you probably arranged with the group that's going to see him to at midway just sort of exchange places. I wouldn't think that's a bad idea at all. Those first two poems were written by Mr. County Cullen and Mr. Waring Cooney, two black male poets writing in the 30s. The first poem is called Incident. It's a tiny little poem. We can look in the poem and see that Mr. County Cullen extracted from a very strange situation the essence of that situation. What happens when we choose to remember one thing and one thing only? What happens? Now, he's writing about an 8-year-old person who, if you remember being some of you can remember being 16, probably last week, some of you. It seemed that 2 months took for 10 years to arrive. And this boy says he was 8 years old. He was in the town from May until December. And of all the things that happened there, that's all that he remembered, was having been called out of his name, as we call it. I think it is interesting to see, of all the adventures that took place in that millions of years for an 8-year-old, he remembered that. Now, the second poem is called No Images, written by Waring Cooney, another genius who used his exquisite energy to extract from a condition the essence of that condition. I suggest that every person in this room has asked himself or herself one time or another, am I worth it? Am I, me, Maya, me, Fred, me, Joe, me, Edith, am I, Barbara, am I worth it? Am I worth asking of my society the best it could, must, and should give me? Am I worth asking of my beloveds, my family, my friends, my lovers, the best they could, must, and should give me? And finally, and most crucially, am I worth asking of myself the best I can give myself? Am I really, really worth it? Am I worth getting up early in the morning? Really? Really? Am I, me, Joseph, am I worth it? Am I worth saying no to a party? Am I really worth it? Is my future of such importance that I should give up a little socializing to get to my books? Am I worth it? The poem again. She does not know her beauty. She thinks her brown body has no glory. If she could dance naked under palm trees and see her image in the river, she would know. But there are no palm trees on the street, and dishwater gives back no images. You see? Now, I thought, since you all did choose to come to see me, since you chose to invite me and chose to come to see me, we would spend the next 4 or 5 hours. I hope you brought everything you need. just look at ways at looking at ourselves, preparing some reflectors of ourselves. I'm going to use Black American poetry, probably exclusively. I mean, now, it's not in my contract. You understand? I may not. But I probably will, because it's so rich, it's so beautiful, it's so seldom cherished, and almost never taught. And I want you to see it, because I suggest that this literature can be credited with the survival of an entire people, or two. I will make my point later on. Now, I'm going to look at love, not because this is Black History Month and I want to talk about love, but because, again, I suggest that love and love alone can be credited with the survival of an entire species. Now, by love, I don't mean mush. I don't mean sentimentality. I mean that condition in the human spirit so profound that it encourages us to develop courage, and then to trust that courage to build bridges, and to trust those bridges in attempts to reach other human beings. That's what I mean by love. I'm going to look at erotic love, romantic love, family love, and self-love. Now, looking at erotic and romantic love, it's sad to say when a number of non-blacks write about blacks and romantic love, they would have us believe, because they are erroneously informed, that white people make love and black people just have sex. However, let us look at the documents. Let's look at the documents. 19th century. Here's a black man, a folk song from the 19th century, in which a black man talks about the woman he loves. He said, "The woman I love is fat and chocolate to the bone. And every time she shakes, some skinny woman loses her home." That's it. That's it. 19th century again. A black woman talking of the man she loves. Now, this shred from this 19th century folk song found its way into Mr. W.C. Handy's 20th century blues, the St. Louis blues. The woman said, "He's blacker than midnight, teeth like flags of truth. He's the finest thing in the whole St. Louis. They say The blacker the berry, sweeter is the juice. That's love poetry, folks. Poetry is asked to be magical, mystical, lyrical, and musical. There's a line, this is just an aside, there's a line in a 19th century spiritual in which, but to me, one of the most poetic lines. It says, green trees are bending, poor sinner stands a trembling. Now, of course, you could say there was a cold wind. Actually, the Siberian Express coming out of the northeastern corridor, coming down and touching someone who hadn't done the right thing, who was standing in a copse of trees and shaking as a consequence. Or you could simply say, green trees are bending, poor sinner stands a trembling. Exquisite poetry. Now, to look at romantic love, I use the oral literature. In fact, I use under my umbrella of literature anything handed from one generation to the next generation to encourage that next generation to survive and to do better than that, to thrive, and to do better than that, to thrive with some passion, some compassion, some humor, and some style. So I use a lot of things under my umbrella called literature. I include, of course, the written body of information and culture. I include oral literature. I include the fact that black people all over the world can hold entire conversations without forming words, and there's no need for translation. A person from Roxbury, Massachusetts, can go to Ghana, to the Makula market in Accra, West Africa, and say, whole conversations. Just an aside, another aside. Recently I was in Atlanta, and I had just been speaking on the communication between black women and how body behavior tells you so much. So that young black women in a flirtatious mood are likely to put their hands on their bodies. It's not really, they're not really on their waist. They're a little higher than their waist. And older ladies will put their hands right on those waist bones, those top bones. And ladies of about my age, which as the French say is a certain age, will put their hands down there, just about like that. But when old black women ball up both fists and put them back here and step back on you, woo, that's some instruction. You start to move, child. Well, I had been talking about that afternoon, and I drove from this site, and it was raining like everything in Atlanta, and I was on a 3-lane street, 3 lanes going that way and 3 lanes going the other. And suddenly a car pulled out of a filling station in the middle of the block. The driver didn't mean to join the traffic going that way. She actually pulled in front of my car. And I just looked. I didn't believe that. And I looked to my left, and there was another car with 2 black women in it. And the woman pulled right in front of their car. And it's raining, so the woman in the passenger seat next to me, there, rolled down her window. I rolled down mine. This black woman looked over at me and said, "Girl," and rolled up her window. I knew exactly what you meant. Everything. Well, all that I include under my umbrella, but let's look at the written literature. The written literature, 19th century, love literature. Miss Georgia Douglas Johnson, black lady poet, wrote, "I want to die while you love me. while yet you hold me fair, while laughter lies upon my lips and lights are in my hair, yes. I want to die while you love me. Who would care to live till love had nothing more to ask and nothing more to give? No, I want to die while you love me and bear to that still bed your kisses, turbulent, unspent, to warm me while I'm dead. James Weldon Johnson, no relation, in writing in 1916, wrote, "Seemed like to me that everything is wrong. Seemed like to me the birds done lost their song. Seemed like to me the days are just twice as long since she went away. The glory of the day was in her face. The beauty of the night was in her eyes. And over all her loveliness, the grace of morning blushing in the early skies. Seemed like to me, I just can't help but sigh. Seemed like to me my throat keeps getting dry. Seemed like to me a tear stay in my eye since she went away. And in her voice, the calling of the dove, like music of a soft, melodious part. And in her smile, the breaking light of love and all the gentle virtues in her heart. And now, that glorious day, that beauteous night, the birds that signal to their mates at dawn, to my dull ears, to my tear-blinded sight, are one with all the dead, now that she is gone. Seemed like to me, I just can't help but sigh. The glory of the day was in her face." James Weldon Johnson, 1916. Wait. Paul Laurence Dunbar, writing in 1892, wrote a poem called A Negro Love Song. It could have been written last week by a woman newly introduced to to her own independence. Now, Mr. Dunbar wrote the poem through a man's voice, but it is definitely a woman's poem. The refrain is, "Jump back, honey, jump back. Seen my lady home last night, jump back, honey, jump back. Held her hand and squeezed it tight, jump back, honey, jump back. Heard her sigh, that little sigh, saw that light gleam in her eye, saw a smile go flitting by. I said, jump back, honey, jump back. The mockingbird was singing fine, jump back, honey, jump back. And my heart was beating so that when I reached my lady's door, I just couldn't bear to go. I said, jump back, honey, jump back. So I put my arms around her waist, jump back, honey, jump back. I raised her lips and took a taste, jump back, honey, jump back. I said, love me, honey, do you love me true? You love me as well as I love you? And then she answered, of course I do, but jump back. James Weldon. Gordon Parks, the photographer and director, writing of romantic love, wrote, through winter-locked and hungered days, in the mind-shaped trials of doubt-filled years, over hours, hourless, and mistaken roads, I searched for you. If, as you say, during pillow talk, you do not know me, it is because I am you. I have been you for 1,000 years. Our love is older than air. That's Mr. Gordon Parks. You know, he has a number of books of poetry. It would be wonderful if you'd avail yourselves of this opportunity of being in this city of higher education. It I know I don't have to remind you all, but I will, that there's a world of difference between being trained and being educated. It would behoove you so that when you leave this institution, you will have a lot to go on. It would behoove you to make yourselves take advantage of the libraries. Do. We have ill-treated librarians historically. They study their sciences, and then as soon as they're appointed to some job, position, we immediately start treating them as if they're merely custodians of dusty tomes. The truth is, librarians have a magic and a mystery. And you should, I think, go tomorrow morning to the librarian using any appellation you all have agreed upon and say, last evening, Miss Angelou mentioned Miss Frances Harper, 19th century poet, Mr. George Moses Horton, that's Horton. Be taking notes, folks. You shouldn't waste this time. Anne Spencer with a C. I'll say you an Anne Spencer poem in a minute. James Weldon Johnson and County Cullen and Langston Hughes, some 19th, some 20th century. Now, and tell the librarian, I don't know how to get these people's works because most of them are anthologized, but don't have single books of poetry. So only you can help me, please. Now, don't imagine and expect any immediate response. Don't. Because there's so many years will have passed since the librarian has been asked to activate that expertise. What you will get is about 4 minutes of this. But when the shock wears off, he or she will send all over this state to satisfy your request. You must know Anne Spencer. Miss Spencer, 19th century black lady poet, wrote a letter to my sister. It is dangerous for a woman to defy the gods, to taunt them with the tongue's thin tip, or to strut in the weakness of mere humanity, or draw a line, daring them to cross. The gods own the searing lightning, tormenting fears, and the anger of red monthly sin. But much worse, if you mince timidly, if you dodge this way or that, sweat agony drops, throw your frail body over your feeble young, if you have beauty or none, vowed or celibate, the gods are juggernauts, passing over. This you may do. Lock your heart, then quietly, lest they peer within, light no lamp when dark comes down, and raise no shade for sun. Breathless must your breath come through, if you would dare die and deny the gods their godlike fun. Miss Anne Spencer, beautiful poet. Now, there's an African saying which is, the trouble for the thief is not how to steal the chief's bugle, but where to blow it. The issue which faces you and has faced you, obviously, the big issue was not to enter this city of higher learning. It may not really be a problem to remain here or to leave this place with some success and possibly some glory. But once you have been here, what do you take away? What do you have? Do you realize, I know you do, but still, the first Africans were brought to this country in 1619. Now, I don't mean to cast aspersions or to signify on my white brothers and sisters who are New Englanders in the audience, but I just remind you that was 1 year before the Mayflower docked. 1619. We have gone through experiences so bizarre they couldn't be included in Mr. Alex Haley's phenomenon, that book, Roots, nor even in the television phenomenon, in which I played Kunta Kinte's grandmother. Couldn't be included. So bizarre. And look at us today, having been brought here, strangers in chains and slaves more so. Today, we're upwards of 30 million. And that is a conservative estimate. I know people who swear that there are more than 30 million black people in the Baptist church. They're not counting CME, AME Zion, AME, converted Jews and Mormons, but that's another night. How do the people survive? I suggest by the literature, directly by the literature. And all of it is written, composed, painted, danced for all of us, all the time. Some years ago, I was with Porgy and Bess. I was the première danseuse, not the first dancer. I was the la prima ballerina. I was very young and quite mad. And I was with a company of, among 63 people, there were 140 degrees in music. We had traveled throughout Europe. I mean, there were so few places for black singers trained in European classics to work. So the company could afford to get a person who had 1 degree from Curtis and another from Juilliard, just to be in the chorus. So there were these beautifully trained and magnificently talented singers. And we arrived in Morocco. Well, the company sent the sets on to Spain, and the conductor informed this group of opera singers that they were obliged to perform in concert. Black opera singers, white opera singers, Asian opera singers, Hispanic, Native American opera singers are all one people, much like New York taxi drivers. They all have their same stuff, you know, and so they were ready to sing. I mean, I think they had their portfolio on microfiche or microfilm or something behind their earlobes. Well, I said to the conductor, I'm sorry, that is not my discipline. I have no aria. I am the dancer. Although I did sing a part, but I mean, I sang by heart, you know, and this other singers would help me, and the associate conductor would help me, telling me, you flatted the E, Maya. I didn't even know I sang an E or anywhere in the alphabet. So the conductor, who was as mad as I, looked at me. He was Russian, with masses of Russian hair and Russian eyes that just danced like that and glittered and everything. And he had this artistic temperament. I think he heated it up in a samovar and poured glasses or something every morning. He looked at me and said, but don't you at least know one spiritual? And I thought, is grits groceries? Me? I mean, to ask me? I grew up in Arkansas, in a town much smaller than this auditorium. And my grandmother was mother of the church. She raised me. Mama took me to church on Sunday. I don't mean we left. That was all day Sunday. And then Monday evening was usher board meeting. Tuesday evening was prayer meeting. Wednesday evening was choir practice. Thursday evening was missionary meeting. Friday evening was visit the sick. We didn't go to church on Saturday. We just used the entire day to prepare to go to church on Sunday, the entire. And at all those gatherings we sang. So I knew every long meter hymn, every Dr. Watts, I knew gospel, spirituals, I knew hums, hollers, grunts, chants. I knew them all, of course. I said to him, possibly I can think of something. Well, the other singers went out onto the stage. They had rehearsed throughout the day, and they went out and delivered themselves beautifully of the important aria in the canon of European music. Beautifully. Logo immobile, beautifully. Un bel dit. They sang pretty little Purcell or Benjamin Britten art songs about that long. Oh, sang. It was very well received. And then I went out onto the stage. There was a 120-piece orchestra in the pit. How could they help me with that viola and cello? And I said, lay out, it's all right. It's all right, right? Yes, sir. So I thought of this song Mama sang. My grandmother would go into church every Sunday. Now, I was sent to her from Arkansas when I was 3 years old. I'm from California when I was 3. I stayed with her until I was 13. Every Sunday, Mama would go into the church and sit in the mother of the church pew. When she died, she was 6'2", so there was a presence about her. She would sit, she'd never look up at the minister up there. She'd keep her eye on me over in the children's pew. But 15 minutes after the service began, every Sunday, the minister would say, and now we'll be privileged with a song from Sister Henderson. And every Sunday, my grandmother would say, me? Now, when you're young, no one can so embarrass you as much as an adult to whom you're related. I used to just die. I would just be mortified. I'd sit there and think, Mama, get up and sing. Everybody knows you're going to sing. They know what you're going to sing. Just get up, Mama, and sing. Mama would look all up in the ceiling as if she was thinking what she was going to sing. It was the same song for 10 years. And the kids in the children's pew would be giggling and sliding off the pews and saying, your grandma doing it again. She's doing that. But finally, she'd put her pocketbook down, put her handkerchief on top of it, and stand and sing. And in Morocco, all alone on the stage, I sang her song. I am a poor pilgrim of sorrow. I'm lost in this wide world alone. No hope have I for tomorrow. I started to make heaven my home. I want you to know I sang the whole song through. When I finished, 4,500 Arabs jumped up, hit the floor, and started to shout. Now, I was so nervous. I didn't know what to do. Why did these people jump up like that? I mean, until you sung Go Down, Moses, Down by the Riverside, some of those songs, and had them sung back to you in French or Spanish or Italian or Serbo-Croat or Russian or Arabic or Fanti or Yoruba, I suggest you haven't come to grips with the literature. A literature so real that it will not indulge a distance of continents, oceans, centuries, races, slavery, hate, oppression. It indulges no distance. It says, I speak through the black experience. That's what I know. I'm talking about the human condition. What it is like to be a human being. What makes us weep. How we can fall and fail and rise, and how our souls can look back and wonder at how we got over. That is a literature. Now, mind you, all sorts of people use it. Have you ever noticed that when white Americans use the literature, the rhythm may not be just right on the nose, but watch and see, when people use our songs, something happens, the corners of their lips turn up. You notice it. I'm gonna lay down my burden. Oh, when the saints go marching in, oh, when the saints go... Look at it. Look at it. I tell you, I stood there. I was so nervous when those people were screaming back at me. Screaming. I thought, what is that? Are they feeling sympathy? Have I given them a reason to feel bathos for my condition? Is that why they're doing it? Why? I looked stage right, stage left at the singers who had sung Respighi, Rossini, Bach, Beethoven, Haydn. They'd sung these lovely little Handel pieces, lovely things, and had been well received. And I had sung what Dr. Du Bois called the sorrow songs, not written by the free and easy or anybody accredited as being creative. And look at it. The people had leapt into the palms of my hands. I looked to my friends, these wonderful singers, stage left, stage right, who had been so kind. I had been sort of a mascot to them because I was no threat to them as a singer, you see. So they had been so kind. I looked at them, they were looking out at me like this. I said, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry that I have the glory. I'm sorry. Sorry. That evening, when I left the auditorium, it was a stadium. When I left the stadium, I walked alone in Morocco. It was my first visit to North Africa, and so I didn't have Arabic. But I walked alone wondering, what was that? When the great and important pieces of legislation in this country had been written and signed, for the most part, my people had been illiterate. When the big pieces of what Thomas Wolfe calls this everlasting earth had been divvied up and handed out to the mighty and the few, for the most part, my people couldn't, in truth, claim to own the chains they wore or the awkward names they had been so recently given. But look what they gave me and the world, a literature which heralds the survival, and the thriving, which is for everyone's use. Like all literature, it is for everybody's use. It is a glorious gift, full of splendor and a generosity of spirit. I know that all those years ago in that little town in Arkansas, black kids performed in church. They still do. In Winston-Salem, where I live today, kids perform. And the phrase which describes them, small children especially, is, little Mistress Naomi is going to render a rendition. Or little Master Michael is going to render a rendition. Well, the rendition for the little kids was always the same. The same poem. It was said in Christmas and Easter. And the kids would practice it. It's just a simple thing. They shouldn't have had to practice it. It should have been a race memory by then. But because everybody said it, but the kid would get up and go, what you looking at me for? I didn't come to stay. I just come to tell you and some kind old lady, a kind old man in the congregation would lean forward and say, Christmas, honey. Christmas Day. And the kid would say, Christmas Day. And he'd get off the steps And the old people in the audience would say, Lord, didn't she do nicely? Bless that child's heart, he did so sweetly. Well, I wanted to render renditions, but I had a very serious problem, a psychological problem when I was young. So for almost 6 years, I didn't speak. I was what is called a volunteer mute. That is, I had voice, but I couldn't speak. And I would sit there and watch those kids. What you do? And I just knew, I mean, if I could have spoken, what I would have done, because I read, I memorized. I had Paul Laurence Dunbar, County Cullen, Langston Hughes, James Weldon Johnson. I had them on the tip of my tongue. I had Shakespeare on the tip of my, I had Edgar Allan Poe. I loved Poe so much, I called him Eep to myself. Eep would have said, I loved Emily Dickinson too. I really loved those poets. And so I memorized. I could just think and roll it out for myself, but I couldn't speak. And then people were very unkind. Older people can be brutal. I know it's often said that children can be cruel, but children don't know what's at stake often. But older people can really be brutal. And they used to pass me in the roads and say, it's a shame Sister Henderson's California granddaughter done gone mental. Fruits. And also, or you know how Sister Henderson's California granddaughter is. And I had no way of getting revenge myself. But at 12 and a half, I got my voice back. I decided I would render a rendition. In the CME church in Stamps, Arkansas, the whole congregation, all in counting backsliders, those who have never been to church since, all of those, counted up to about 62 people. But I was going to get mine, and I was going to render Portia's speech from The Merchant of Venice. That would get them, that would knock them off their pews. I could see myself saying, the quality of mercy is not strained. It droppeth as a gentle run. Oh, it was going to be hot. I had it all choreographed. But Mama asked me, Mama said, Sister, what are you planning to render? So I said, Mama, it's a piece written by Mr. William Shakespeare. Mama said, Sister, who is this very William Shakespeare? Now, I knew I had to tell Mama that Shakespeare was white. And Mama felt the less we said about whites, the better. And if we didn't mention them at all, maybe they'd just get up and leave. I had to tell her the truth, but I figured out how to get around her. I said very quickly, Mama, he's white, but he's dead. Thinking, and adding, and he's been dead for centuries. Thinking then she'd forgive him this little idiosyncrasy, you know. But she said, no, ma'am, mistress, no, you will not. You will render Mr. Paul Laurence Dunbar, Mr. County Cullen, Mr. Langston Hughes, Mr. James Weldon Johnson. Yes, you will, little miss. Yes, you will. Well, years later, when I physically and psychologically left the condition which is Stamps, Arkansas, a condition, I hazard a guess, in which a number of people, even in this auditorium, dwell in today. I found myself and still find myself, whenever I like, stepping back and getting a handful of Shakespeare. Whenever I like, I know it was written for me. It was written to encourage a species to continue. I will use Shakespeare anytime I like. I'll use Octavio Paz, Carlos Fuentes, whenever I like. I will use Sholem Aleichem, Elie Wiesel, whenever I like. I'll take it. Turgenev, Chekhov, Gorky, whenever I like. Kobo Abe, anytime I feel like it. Li Po, yes, sir. Saint-Exupéry, anytime. It was all for me. I suggest to you that you take that same liberty and that same respect to the librarian and ask for this Black American poetry. Keep it alive. People live in direct relation to the heroes and sheroes they have, always and in all ways. And I suggest that this literature is a hero-shero. Now, to go back to erotic, a romantic love, I guess. Miss Marie Evans, beautiful lyrical poet, lives in Indianapolis. I hope you'll invite her. Marie, M-A-R-I, make notes. Marie Evans wrote, "Where have you gone? Why did you leave me? Where have you gone with your confident walk and your crooked smile? Are you aware that when you left, with you went the sun, the moon, and what few stars there are? Where have you gone with your confident walk and your crooked smile, with my heart in one pocket and the rent money in the other?" Now, Miss Nikki Giovanni. One of these days, you're going to walk in this house, and I'm going to be wearing that long African gown. And you, not noticing me at all, will say, "The problem in this country," and I'm going to be taking that gown off and licking your arm. You will go on as you always do. "What we ought to do in the struggle," and I'm going to be unbuckling your belt and taking down your pants. You, not noticing me at all, will continue, "I want to talk to the brothers. I want to talk to..." And then you will notice your state of undress. And knowing you, you will probably turn to me and say, "Hey, Nikki, isn't this counter-revolutionary?" Nikki, I better do some of my own, I guess. And look, I want to move to self-love. I think it is dangerous for a person to believe he or she is loved by a person or persons who don't love themselves. I think it's impossible to love someone if you don't love yourself. I do. You might lust for them, desire, envy, want to possess, but I don't know if that's love. There's another African saying, which is, "Be careful when a naked person offers you a dress." I like to look at self-love because I don't mean it selfishly so much as I mean it self-fully. A few years ago, I had a play in New York. I had written the book and the lyric and the music. And the producer, the night before we were to open, informed me that we needed a work song. So I went out, sat down to write a work song. I wanted to write something about men and women working together, because I think that's healthy. And the song was, "There ain't no pay beneath the sun, sweet as rest when a job's well done. I was born to work up to my grave, but I was not born to be a slave. One more round, let's heave it down. One more round, let's heave it down. Papa drove steel, Mama stood guard. Never heard 'em holler 'cause the work was hard. They were born to work. Well, it goes on there about 98 verses. When I heard the professional singers sing it, I realized I had written a man's work song. I had put women in the lyric, but it was the traditional form. I tote that barge and bless you, and tote that barge and lift that bale, and which I don't knock, but that's not what I set out to write. So I decided to write a woman's work song. And maybe the women will tell me if I came close to it. I used thinking of that cliche that men may work from sun to sun if they can find jobs, but women's work is never done. So here it is. I've got the children to tend, the clothes to mend, the floor to mop, the food to shop, and then the chicken to fry, the baby to dry, got company to feed, the garden to weed, I got shirts to dress, the shirts to press, the tops to dress, the cane to be cut, I got to clean up this hut, then see about the sick, then the cotton to pick. Shine on me, sunshine, rain on me, rain. Fall softly dewdrops and cool my brow again. Storm blow me from here with your fiercest wind. Let me float across the sky till I can rest again, because I have got to see about those people's poo. Oh no, I got to get to the school. No, I got to pick up the mail. No, I got to visit the jail. No, I got the children to we are phenomenal. Women are phenomenal. It is the truth. We are. It's tragic that many of us don't trust that enough to even test our potential. But the potential is there. We really are. So I've written a poem called Phenomenal Woman. And I wrote it for black women. And I wrote it for white women. I wrote it for Asian, Hispanic, Native American, and Aleut women. I wrote it for women in the kibbutzim of Israel and in the Palestinian concentration camps, wherever they are. I wrote it for all women. I wrote it for fat women, very fat women, those who are unhappy with their sizes and will call a friend often with an alarming frequency in the middle of the night saying, "There's a skinny woman trying to get out." And I wrote it for fat women who are comfortable with their sizes and pose for those sensuous pictures, those before pictures on Weight Watchers. I wrote it for skinny women, those who deserve all our sympathy. I wrote it for all of us. That's right. Mind you, I know that men are phenomenal too. I know that because I know that nature abhors imbalance and will not deal with it. I don't mean nature deals with it grudgingly. Nature does not deal with it at all. Like you, I have been told that 98% of all the species which have lived on this little blob of spit and sand are now extinct because they got out of balance. And we're still here. So men, obviously, must be as phenomenal as women. I will only say this to the men in the audience. You will have to write your own poem. This one. That's it. This one. Many people wonder where my secret lies. I'm not cute or built to suit a fashion model size. When I try to show them, they think I'm telling lies. I say it's in the reach of my arms, the span of my hips, the stride of my step, the curl of my lips. I'm a woman, phenomenal woman. I walk into a room just as cool as you please, and to a man the fellows stand or fall down on their knees. And then they swarm around me, a hive of honeybees. I say, oh, it's the fire in my eyes, the flash of my teeth, the swing in my waist, the joy in my feet. Men themselves have wondered what they see in me. They try so much, but they can't touch my inner mystery. When I try to show them, they say they still can't see. Now you understand just why my head's not bowed. I don't shout or jump about or have to talk too loud. When you see me walking, it ought to make you proud. I say it's in the click of my heels, the bend of my hair, the palm of my hands, the need for my care, because I'm a woman, phenomenal woman. That's my mother and all your mothers, and my grandmothers and all your grandmothers, and then my great-grandmothers and your great-grandmothers, then my great-great and your great-great, my great-great-great and your great-great, and all you women and me. Thank you. No images. No images. No images. Dishwater gives back no images. You have to constantly look at yourselves and find in your own history or in literature or both images for yourselves. You must do so. Men and women, we must do so. We must remember that we have been greatly loved. As James Baldwin says, we have been paid for. All of us, each of us has been paid for. Just imagine if you could see, come face to face with a great-grandparent, great-great-great-great-grandparent. And he said, or she said to you, so you're the reason. You're the reason, huh? You're the reason I struggled to leave the potato famine of Ireland. You're the reason. You're it. You're the reason I left the pogroms of Eastern Europe. You are it. You are it. So you're the one, huh? The reason I stayed out at Ellis Island for months and had my name changed in something unspeakable. You are it. You're the reason I lay spoon fashion in the filthy hatches of slave ships and survived. For you, you're the reason. You're the reason I came from Asia to what we call Gold Mountain and lived here for a generation almost without a mate. You are the one. You are the reason I left Malta and the Philippines. You are it. Okay. How are you? How you doing? When you really stop and think about it, you can see that each of us is the end result of a great, howbeit brooding, sometimes terribly painful, love. We have been paid for. We have all been paid for. So instead of looking in dishwater for that reflection of yourself, to put more starch in your backbones, as my grandmother used to call it, whenever you sort of slump, she said, put some starch in your backbone, sister. Straight. So I would suggest to you to go first to your families. And if you can't find a named person, go to a fictional person. He or she exists in your family. You can be sure of it. Back a few generations and go to the literature. Always go to the literature to find encouragement. I encourage you to look at that Black American literature. Then look at white American literature. You ought to read Martin Buber. You ought to read to know who you really are. You ought to have some of Martin Buber inside you to understand. You should have Edna St. Vincent Millay to talk about courage. You know, courage is the most important of all the virtues, because without courage, you can't practice any other virtue with consistency. I wish I had said that first. Actually, Aristotle said it, but never mind. Never mind. Edna St. Vincent Millay, listen to this little piece. I'll just do an excerpt from a poem of hers. You have to picture this white woman in the 20s in New York, highly appreciated, greatly respected, even envied, well off enough, who wrote, "I will die, but that is all I will do for death. I hear his horse's hooves on the stalls. He has business this morning, business in Cuba, business in the Balkans, but he must mount by himself. I will not give him a leg up. I am not in his employ. I will die, but that is all I will do for death. I will not tell him where the black boy lies hidden in the swamp. I will not tell him the addresses of my friends' homes or my enemies either. Brothers and sisters, the keys to the city are safe with me. Through me, you will never be overthrown, for I shall die, but that is all I will do for death." Now, is that hot? You see, so, I know I'm staying a long time, but when you, especially as you're young, especially as you are being molded by life, by your own experiences, by the things to which you are exposed, as you are still being formed, I encourage you to put it all inside. All knowledge is spendable currency depending upon the market. Just put it in the computer, remembering that this computer is so great. This gift to young people. And since, as far as we know for certain, it is given to us to live but once, let us so live that we will not regret years of useless virtue and inertia. And in dying, we can say, all my conscious life and energies have been dedicated to the most noble cause in the world, the liberation of the human mind and human spirit, beginning with my own. There is that in the human breast which will not be done down even by death. Every person in this auditorium has gone to bed some night or other with fear or insecurity or pain or loss or grief, and yet each of us has awakened, arisen, made whatever ablutions we could make or chose to make, and then we've seen other human beings and said, "Hi, good morning, how are you?" "Fine, thanks, and you?" Now, that is so exciting. I mean, that is so thrilling. Look at it. Wherever that thing resides, if it's behind the kneecap or in the bend of the elbow, therein lies our nobleness. Not nobility, that's a pompous word to me, but the nobleness of the human spirit, which rises. You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me in the very dirt, but still like dust, I'll rise. Does my sassiness upset you? Why are you beset with gloom? Just because I walk as if I have oil wells pumping in my living room. Just like moons and like suns, with the certainty of tides, just like hope springing high, still I rise. Did you want to see me broken? Bowed head and lowered eyes, shoulders falling down like teardrops, weakened by my soulful cries. Does my sassiness upset you? Don't take it so hard just because I laugh. As if I have gold mines digging in my own backyard. You can shoot me with your words. You can cut me with your lies. You can kill me with your hatefulness. But just like life, I'll rise. Does my sexiness offend you? Oh. Does it come as a surprise that I dance as if I have diamonds at the meeting of my thighs? Out of the huts of history's shame, I rise. Up from a past rooted in pain, I rise. A black ocean leaping and wide, welling and swelling and bearing in the tide. Leaving behind nights of terror and fear, I rise. Into a daybreak remarkably clear, I rise. Bringing the gifts that my ancestors gave. I am the hope and the dream of the slave. And so, oh, you all are sweet. Wow, you all are hot. My mom, thank you. My mom, I thank God and I thank her, is fine. She lives in California. She's retired from the Merchant Marines. She's fine. Now, I want to sing you all a song because I want you to think about it. Some years ago, I was in London, and I used to keep a place over there, and I would write, usually from about 11 at night until 6 or so in the morning. Then I'd go out for a walk. One day I walked out down King's Road, and there were two young people, both white, male and female, long hair both, sitting with their packs and things, with their backs against a shop. And I simply recorded them maybe a half block away. And then a man walked out of the store. He must have gotten there at 5, I guess. He walked out of the store and turned and spat on the young people. They were about 19, 18, something. I don't mean he just spat. I mean he cleared his throat and spat. And I didn't know what to do. I mean, I used all the vituperatives I had at my disposal, which are not negligible, and various combinations of them. But I didn't know what to do, so I wrote a song. I went back and wrote a song for Roberta Flack. And the song is Take Time Out. And I suggest to you to take a moment for yourselves, always to increase your understanding of the place you occupy and the time you are spending. Do so for yourselves, young people. Please do, so that you will not regret in years to come, boy, if I'd have only, had I only, while I was at UMass, Had I only always take some time out for yourselves. Therefore, you are engaged and engaging. And you are doing something not just for yourself or your family or your race, but for the entire species. For our charge is to make this country more than it is today, more than what James Baldwin calls these yet-to-be United States. When you see him on the freeway hitching rides with his dog and his guitar by his side, you need to ask, what's all the lying and the dying and the killing and the thrilling all about? Take time out. When you see him with a band around his head and an army surplus bunk that makes his bed, you need to ask, what's all the beating and the cheating and the bleeding and the needing all about? Take time out. Take a minute, show some kindness for the folks who thought that blindness was an illness that affected eyes alone. Take a month to show some kindness for the folks who thought that blindness was an illness that affected eyes alone. When you see her walking barefoot in the rain, and you know she's tripping on a one-way train, you need to ask, what's all the bleeding and the needing, the killing and the thrilling all about? You ought to take time out. Now you can sell your soul for money, then run off to the country for your cookouts and your parties on the lawns, while your children seek sedation in Eastern meditation or visions that go shooting up their arms. When you know that youth is dying on the run, and my daughter trades dope stories with your son, we ought to ask, what's all the selling and the yelling, the bleeding and the needing, the cheating and the beating, the lying and the dying, killing